Okay, in this module what we want to talk about is labeling. Specifically, we want to look at automatic labeling. That means that as you zoom in or zoom out, the labels appear or disappear as they need to for what you're looking at. But we're also going to talk about some of the other features of labeling, such as formatting the label so it has the right color. We're also going to look at is the label horizontal? Does it run at a diagonal? Does it fit the best? Does it stay inside the polygon? Does it go outside the polygon? So we're going to look at some other features of labeling. But specifically, we want to make sure that we learn how to do automatic labeling, where it turns on and turns off at an appropriate zoom level. So that's what we're after in this lesson. So we're going to do this on my computer, so you're going to see me doing it exactly as you should be doing it. As you want to try to emulate what I'm doing, you can pause the video and try to catch to the same point I'm at, then let the video play for a short period of time, and then pause it again, and so on and so forth, so that you can try to stay with where I'm at on the video and making everything happen. So as you can see on my screen, I have a blank screen right now, so I got to start by adding some data to my screen. So I'll use the Add Data button here to add the data to my screen. I'm going to go get some data off of one of my server drives. Now this is not an ArcGIS server. I'm just going to look for some services running so that we can just bring in some regular data and do that. So let's see, that's not where I want to go. Let's try this one here. See if that one will open up for me. Again, this is not a service running. Instead, this is just some shape files that we're going to load. So you can see there, I'm going to go to the United States. Takes a moment to open up there. You might need to download the data off of one of our websites. There's some other websites that have shape files in it, but we've given you a link in the written material where you can download some of the data. I'm going to go to States here, because I'm going to get some Kentucky data, hopefully. And there's KY for Kentucky. And I want some Polygon data for the state of Kentucky. Taking a few moments to open there. And we'll bring in a Kentucky County map. By Kentucky County map, I'm referring to a map that shows the counties of the state of Kentucky with the, not an individual county, but the entire state of Kentucky, the county level. So there we go. I'm going to add that data file in. Take a few seconds to load here. Okay, so now you're seeing a map of the state of Kentucky. And I'm only going to load one file in. In the exercise, we suggest you bring in multiple files, but right now I'm only going to load in one file here. So you can see this map of the state of Kentucky. We could very quickly turn on labels by right-clicking on the layer and say Label Features. But we have no real control over that. As you can see, lots of the labels go outside county boundaries. It's just too cluttered. That's not a very good looking map that you can see on your screen right now. So that's not the appropriate way to label it for a professional type map. It's okay for a quick label to see maybe what the name of a county is or knowing where to zoom in to what you're looking for, but it really is not the appropriate way to label a map. So we're going to turn that back off by right clicking again and just uncheck that label feature. To label a map, what we need to do is go to the Properties window. So you can go to the Property window by right-clicking and going down to Properties, or you can double-click on the layer name, and that will open up the Properties window. As you look across the top, there's a tab called Labels, and we want to go to that tab there. The first button that we must click, or the first checkbox we must click on, is label features in this layer. If you don't click on that, no matter what you do below here, nothing shows up as being labeled. You've got a choice if you're labeling all features. You can define classes. We're doing the very basic labeling right now, so we're going to say label all features the same way. What feature do you want to use as the label? So what field in the attribute table do you want to use to label with? So here's our choices that we have. If you don't know what those choices mean, you might end up having to go and close this properties window and look at the attributes of the layer so you know what is the appropriate thing to label using. Well, I happen to know this label, I happen to know this layer, and so I'm going to use the one called name, which is the county names. You can write an expression where you can put multiple features showing up at the same time. Say you want to know the name of the county and the number of people that were in the county. You can write an actual expression to do that under the expression button. But again, we're trying to talk about the basic labeling techniques, so we're not going to worry about doing that right now. In the middle part of this window, you get basically a typical formatting window that you might have in a word processor, where you can see the font face, the size of the font, the color of the font, bold, italics, underline, and even putting some symbols in there. Well, we're going to make a few changes here. I'm going to change the font face. I'm going to change it from Arial to Times New Roman. I'm going to change it from 8-point font to 10-point font. And just so that it's obvious that I made a change here, I'm going to make my county names appear in purple. You might not actually want to do that on a real map, but I'm trying to show you how we can make these changes. So I'm going to make them appear in purple, and let's make them bold. So that's the middle part of this labels window, is formatting and choosing the appropriate font. The lower part of this window, the buttons for placement and scale range, are two very important buttons. So let's go to the placement properties first. It opens up a new window, and I'm going to go over to the placement tab. Don't worry about the conflict detection right now. And I've got some choices. Do I want to always label horizontal, always label straight, or try horizontal first and then straight? And that's what I normally select there. The next box says only place labels inside the polygon. So that means if this is the shape of my county, I don't have labels that go outside my county shape. And I usually select that. And then if you look at your attribute table, let's take a county that has 2 or 3 islands out in a river. That county would have a line in the attribute table for the basic county outline, but then each of those islands would be their own separate polygons there. And so they would each have a name that they're part of the county that you're trying to label. Well, we can choose different ways to do that. We can say place one label per feature, that's one label per line. Place one label for feature part, or remove duplicate labels. I'm going to say place one label per feature here. That's the typical one that I default using. But you can play with these and see the different effects. A lot of times on a lot of things that you're labeling, it doesn't really make a difference. But let's say you have a river that you're going to label that river. Each one of those little line segments is a separate piece of that river. So each time they stopped and started the tracing of that river, each one of those is a separate feature. And you might get that river labeled 15 times in a very short distance, depending on how they made that feature. So you need to try some of these different ones. So I'm going to say OK here. And so we now have determined how we want our labels to look. The last thing I need is the auto scale range. And the auto scale range, what it does for us is it gives us the ability to say, when does that label turn on? When does that label turn off? So for example, when I zoom into a third of the state, I may want the county names to show up. When I get only to a single county, I don't want that county name to show up any longer, but now I'm more interested in the road features or whatever. As you may already know, we can turn on layers the same way using zoom levels. Well, we're only going to concern ourselves in this exercise turning on labels and not different layers. I'm using zoom. So don't show the label when zoomed instead of showing the label all the time. Out beyond. So what is the maximum distance that we want to be zoomed out and we can still see the label name? Well, one of the things is, where does that number come from? How do we put this in? It's a ratio that we put in here. If you go up here, you can see a number that's right now like 1 to 3,505,764. That is the zoom level that we currently have the map at. It does not have direct implications on degrees, but if you look down here, this map is in degrees, and you got minus 89.9 to 39.257, wherever the cursor was the last time that number changed. So this is my zoom level. The whole map of Kentucky is about 3.5 million. So let's say I want the county names to show up when I'm zoomed in closer than, I don't like any of those values in the pull down, so let me just type my own number in. The 1 is assumed. Do not place commas here. So 1.5 million is what I want. When I'm zoomed in tighter than 1.5 million as my ratio, that label will turn on. I'm going to click in the bottom box here, and notice the commas automatically appear. Do not type the commas in. If you type the commas in, you will get an error. Well, where do I want that label to turn off? That's how tight do I want to zoom in and still be able to see that label name, and once I get in any tighter than that, the label name disappears. So I'm going to choose a value of 125,000. I'm not sure if that's a perfect value, but I would have normally gone out and played with zoom on the map to see where I want to turn that on and off by manually zooming in and out. But for this case, I'm just showing you how this functions. I'm just going to choose a value, and hopefully it's a reasonable value to use. And I'm going to say OK there. And now I have basically controlled the basic functions that I want. Now again, using purple is just for a demonstration purpose here. Probably if my county boundaries are in black, I want my labeling to be in black. If it's a river that's in a blue color, I probably want my river name to be either in blue or in a black color. So, I've chosen here just a color to make it very obvious what I'm doing, but this is probably not the color that you'd want to do in a real map. So I'm going to say OK on the Properties window. And it looks like I've done nothing if you look at this, because nothing's changed. Well, in reality, when I start zooming in, we should see some changes. So I'm going to go up here to the magnifying tool. Yours may not be up on the toolbars. Yours may be a floating toolbox. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit. A box about like that. Give it a moment to redraw. Okay. I don't see any labels there on the map. Look at my scale. My scale is 1 to 1,997,332. We said not to show the labels until I got to 1.5 million. Well, let's zoom in a little bit more then. And now we see the labels. We see that some of the labels run at an angle. Some of the labels run horizontally. It tries horizontal first, but if we look over here at Hancock County, for example, Hancock County is a very narrow county. We couldn't put the word Hancock horizontally, so then they ran it at an angle because that would fit into that county's name. So first the program tried to do it horizontal, then it ran it straight. And you can see now my zoom level is 1,338,348, and we're seeing names. They're purple like I told it to be. They are in bold print. You may not be able to tell if they're bold print or not just by looking at the screen. They're all caps because the name feature I chose was a name feature that was all caps. There's also a name feature that's not all caps and would have made it caps and lowercase, as you might normally look at naming. So that may not have been the appropriate field that I should have used there. Let's zoom in a little bit tighter and see what happens. So I'm going to zoom into about that area there. I'm at 587,234 for my zoom level, and you can see that I can still see all my label names, even though I'm looking at a smaller part of the state. I'm going to continue to zoom in a little bit tighter, mainly into Breckinridge County, and the name is still showing up for Breckinridge County, but I'm at 335,562. I'm going to come over here and zoom on this county boundary area here. Names still showing up because I'm at 288,196. Remember, we set that zoom level at 250,000. Let's zoom in a little bit tighter. See if we get to the 250,000. And we're at 241. Maybe I did not type in what I thought I typed in. Let's go back and check what I typed in. Oh, I typed in 125,000. Okay, let's change that. But that's obviously too tight. And this is the type of things that you do when you set up your labeling. You have to sometimes go in and change it. So I want to make it 500,000. And there you can see the labels turned off, but I'm at 241,633. If I zoom out a little bit, 300,000, 377, 471, 589, and labels reappear at 589. So you can see they're turning on and off as appropriate. They turn on when we get to a certain zoom level. They turn off when we get zoomed in too tight. But that's what we set it to do. We could have them stay on forever as we zoom in tighter and tighter if we want to, just by leaving that box blank, the second box blank. So you can determine when and where you want things to turn on and when you want them to turn off. So this is the basic labeling function of ArcMap.